Picture this. You are driving on a highway just outside St. Louis. Radio on. Nothing special about the view. Overpasses, parking lots, backyards. Now, picture what is still sitting underneath all of that. A pyramid of hand-carried earth, 100 feet tall, its base covering more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Around it once stood a planned city of over 10,000 people. Wide plazas, timber walls, a skyline nothing else on this continent would match again for 700 years. You were taught North America had no real cities before Europeans arrived. Just scattered tribes, open land, waiting to be found. That is not what the evidence says. That is what 19th century Americans decided to believe, because the truth was too uncomfortable to sit with. And the excuse they invented to explain who really built it is one of the strangest cover stories in American history. Stick with us. This one gets genuinely bizarre. Let's get the numbers straight, because they are almost insulting to how little this gets taught. Cahokia was real. It sat where modern Collinsville, Illinois sits today, just across the river from St. Louis. At its peak between 1050 and 1200 CE, it covered 6 square miles, held at least 120 earthen mounds, and packed in somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 residents. For comparison, London at that exact same time held roughly the same number of people, maybe fewer. So, the largest city in North America predates the printing press, the Renaissance, and roughly 400 years of everything you were taught started with Columbus. And somehow, it never made it into a single textbook you owned growing up. That is not an accident. That is a choice someone made a very long time ago. According to Live Science, the Smithsonian, and UNESCO, which designated the site a World Heritage Location in 1982, the scale of what Cahokia's residents built is almost hard to process. Monk's Mound, the central structure, stands roughly 100 feet tall and contains an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth, moved basket by basket, without metal tools, without draft animals, and without the wheel. Archaeologists have also found a massive circular arrangement of timber posts, nicknamed Woodhenge, aligned precisely with the solstice sunrise. Trade goods recovered at the site include copper from the Great Lakes region and seashells from the Gulf of Mexico coast, over 1,000 miles away. This was not a village that got lucky. This was organized civil engineering, astronomy, and long-distance trade, operating at a scale most people assume only existed in Europe or Mesoamerica at the time. So here's the uncomfortable question. If the evidence was always sitting there, in plain sight, under 100 feet of dirt, why did it take this long to accept who built it? The answer has less to do with archaeology and more to do with land. By the early 1800s, the United States government needed a justification for removing native nations from land east of the Mississippi, admitting that native peoples had already built sophisticated cities on that land made removal much harder to defend. It is far easier to take land from wandering tribes than from the descendants of a lost civilization's builders. So, a different story got written instead, one where the real builders were long gone, replaced by whoever happened to be living there now. Convenient. Extremely convenient. Here's the detail most people never learn. We don't actually know what the people who built this city called themselves, their capital, or their gods. Every trace of their own language for it is gone. The name Cahokia comes from a completely different group, the Cahokia tribe, part of the Illiniwek Confederacy, who moved into the area centuries after the original city had already been abandoned. French explorers in the 1600s simply asked the people living nearby what the ruins were called, wrote down the answer, and that borrowed name stuck permanently. It's a little like naming ancient Rome after whoever happened to be renting an apartment there in 1750. The real name, the real language, the real story, the builders told about themselves, all of it is just gone. So if it wasn't the builders' own descendants, who explained Cahokia away? Who did? This one has names attached, and they are bigger than you'd expect. New York Governor DeWitt Clinton and future President William Henry Harrison. Both floated theories of a vanished white race, responsible for the mounds. Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormon Church, built an entire section of religious scripture around the idea of a lost civilization in ancient America. And President Andrew Jackson, arguing for the Indian Removal Act of 1830, described native nations as recent arrivals, occupying land that once belonged to a once powerful race, confirmed in his own remarks to Congress, who had supposedly been wiped out. That argument helped justify forcing tens of thousands of people off their own ancestors' land. A myth about who built a mound became a legal tool for taking one. This idea did not stay a fringe theory. For most of the 19th century, it was closer to settled fact, repeated in school books, newspapers, and political speeches for over 100 years. It took until 1894 for it to finally collapse, when Smithsonian archaeologist Cyrus Thomas published a report built on 2 decades of excavation across hundreds of mound sites nationwide. And here is the irony. Thomas did not set out to defend native builders. He started this project assuming, like everyone else, that a vanished race had built the mounds. The evidence itself changed his conclusion. The same institution that had spent decades entertaining the myth ended up being the one that finally buried it, using nothing but the dirt itself as a witness. So let's be clear about what actually happened here. Cahokia was a real, planned, sophisticated city, bigger than London, built centuries before European contact, by ancestors of native nations who are still here today. The reason you didn't learn that in school has nothing to do with missing evidence. It has to do with a story that was more convenient to tell, invented by specific people for specific political reasons, and repeated so often it became common knowledge for 100 years. So next time you drive past a stretch of ordinary-looking land A parking lot, an overpass, a quiet field. Ask yourself, what convenient story you might be driving over without knowing it.